Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central, and here's your host, Bob Hickey.
You heard the man. Welcome to Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, thanking you for taking the time to join me and my guests as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. One of the things that I love to do is to meet new people, and here in town, we are blessed to have great leadership and people who really do care about the community, many of whom are from within and many of whom come to us from without. One of those individuals who's come in and quickly made a super positive mark is our new Chief of Police. I don't know if I can say new anymore because he's been here for a year, over a year in fact, Chief of Police here in the town of Foxborough, Bill Baker. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Foxborough Central.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So this is a free-form conversation, and boy, do I like to just converse. And so, let's just start off with, you come to us with experience. Why don't you just jump right into a little resume review, and then we can rattle off some good things happening here in town.
I hate to bore your listeners with the resume, but
I've been boring them for years. You go right ahead.
In a nutshell, I am a 43-year veteran of this business and come to Foxborough with a pretty diverse background, having served as a police chief in 3 New England states, Massachusetts, Maine, and New Hampshire. I served as Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Massachusetts and Director of Police Training under Governor Well back in the early 90s. And in the early 2000s, served as Assistant Director of the Justice Department of Washington, where I mentored the national police leaders in more than 40 countries around the world in Latin America, Africa, and the former Soviet republics. Developed a few passions over that time. Sort of fell into the role of being kind of a fixer, so I'd often go into places for 5 or 6 years and try and improve their organizational culture and strategy and leave them better off than I found them. And same was true in my work with the national police forces around the world. As you can imagine, most of those places were post-conflict countries or emerging democracies that were quite a mess. And the United States was doing what it could to support their development, and a big piece of that was developing the justice sector. Domestic violence, another area. I've spent quite a lot of time developing coalitions of various groups to try and deal with the problem of domestic violence, again, in some complex societies around the world. And here at home, having served as the chairman of the Governor's Commission on Domestic Violence. Refugees and immigrants, advocating for the refugee and immigrant community and trying to improve race and justice issues around the country is another great passion of mine. So I've been very fortunate. I've had a wonderful, interesting career and been blessed to have a wonderful supportive family that's made that 43-year journey what it has been. So,
and I think I met your daughter the other day, and so talk a little family.
Yeah, you met Katie, I think, my
Yes.
eldest, and have 3 other children, 2 other girls and a boy, and all happy and successful in their marriages and in their lives, and grateful for that. So
that's fantastic.
Much to be grateful for, and 2 granddaughters, which has been another extraordinary blessing. So.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that. So,
Thank you.
I guess an amazing, resume to the table, but why Foxborough? I mean, we are so honored to have you here, I've heard somebody, he can sit over there heard many positive things, and you've made many great relationships as far as with the civic groups, as well as just the respect you've earned from the different entities in town, and not a negative word have I heard. So how do you do that coming in, given the fact that you're from out of town? I mean, it's a great skill set to be able to do that in any situation, but in law enforcement, there's always going to be my way of doing it, which is always going to be different than the current way of doing it. So how have you found Foxborough, and what motivated you to apply for this position? Because frankly, I'm just wicked impressed.
Well, there's a lot there in that question, that
There
series
is.
of questions. So first of all, I guess one of the reasons I feel like I have some success is I don't come in thinking that any of you should be happy to have me. I very much humbled by this opportunity, and one of the reasons I sought it out, I was frankly about ready to call it a career. And I think the race and justice conversation around the country the turmoil that seems to currently exist and be getting worse between some segment of the population and the police. Many of those controversies caused my children really to say, Dad, this is not the time for a guy like you to be stepping away. That profession needs you, the world needs you, hang in there and keep doing what you've done and what you love to do. And so that was a big part of it. And so as I looked around for what the next opportunity was going to be, Foxborough is a town similar to the town that I grew up with, which was the town of Southborough, only 20 or 25 minutes north on 495. So that was attractive, close to family. The town itself, very interesting demographic, unbelievable environmental amenities. My wife and I walk in the Gilbert Hills State Forest every weekend. And the adjunct of the presence of Gillette and all that comes with that was kind of a unique aspect of policing that not every city or town in the country has. In fact, a very limited number of cities and towns have that honor and distinction.
Indeed, yes.
And so with my global experience around the world and dealing with big venue events, I thought Foxborough looked like a good fit, and I competed for it and was fortunate enough to be selected. Having gotten here, I've been struck by several things. I've been away from Massachusetts. I was a police chief in Southborough back in the early 80s, so it's been quite a long time since I've been here. And to see the environmental amenities and the untouched natural beauty in a place like Foxborough was a little bit surprising. Being so close to Boston and Providence, it's still a pretty typical bucolic New England town, which is great. I think the people of Foxborough have done a great job to keep it that way. The people themselves have been extraordinary, whether it's people I meet going to calls for service as a police officer in uniform or civic groups that I interact with. From every angle, it's been a very welcoming place and a wonderful place to call home. My wife and I moved here immediately last October to become part of the community and live where I work. So that's been very nice too. So it's really been an extraordinary experience, and it'll probably be my last stop on this journey. And I feel very passionately about trying to leave every community and every organization that I've been part of better off than I found it. So I'm 1,000% focused on that. I promise you that.
Well, you said a lot in that response, and many things are worthy of discussion. But let's touch on the challenges, because coming to Foxborough, and it's wonderful that you've moved here and you decided to relocate your family. And again, it's nice you have that support, that they encourage you to do these things and then provide you with the ability to go out and do. So to that end, with our green space and our master development, if you will, Foxborough is a bit of a unique community, but at the same time, it shares a lot of the same problems. You mentioned immigration, and Foxborough hasn't always had such a great reputation as far as tolerance towards minority populations. And so how do you find the environment here to be from a cultural standpoint and from a immigrant getting along with others type of situation? What are your thoughts?
Well, it was interesting. When I first came to Foxborough, I ended up in the area of the charter school. And I saw a lot of people waiting to pick their children up after school. And this is an area, as I said, that both personally and professionally I care quite a lot about. And I came home that day and I thought to myself, man, this is a much more diverse place than I thought. And as it turned out, there's a lot of diversity represented in the charter school, but not really so much in the rest of the community. And so I think that presents an opportunity. And I often share the story about my becoming the police chief in the city of Laconia. And I had met a couple of new refugees, men from Ethiopia, and had gotten to know them and become friendly with them. And one afternoon in the spring, they were standing in front of the bank on Main Street in Laconia, and a citizen of Laconia that was not used to seeing black faces on the main street saw these three black guys with hoods on and called the police and thought that a bank robbery was imminent. And so I had an idea who it might have been, and I responded to the scene and met the officers there and introduced the officers to these guys from Ethiopia. And it was at that point I decided that the diversity that was coming to New Hampshire warranted a bit of education and community discussion to avoid misunderstanding and controversy that could ensue had that encounter become negative. And so we created something called the Laconia Human Relations Committee, which I'd like to replicate here. But basically it brings a bunch of folks from all kinds of disciplines together, legislators and advocates and medical community and academic community and government, all together to try and help people that come here from other countries and cultures assimilate successfully and be successful. And so I think my approach to this is that if Foxborough can be out in front on these issues, even though we may not be a very diverse population today, likely that we'll become more diverse. And I think by collaborating and being out in front of this issue and having positive community dialogue about these issues, it develops a level of trust on all sides. And if an incident occurs of some kind, it's much more likely to have a positive end result if there's a level of trust and understanding by people in a community around issues like this. So I hope to be leading an effort to be more active, and something that we're going to talk about a little later, I think, is my interest in bringing the international exchange program here to Foxborough. Foxborough, I think, in some ways has been very fortunate that the prior administration hired a lot of local kids. The other side of that is, though, a lot of kids grew up in Foxborough and never left Foxborough. And so I have created foreign exchange programs in other departments where I send officers into a foreign country and culture, usually a place where I have relationships with the ambassadors and government officials, and let them spend a week there seeing how democratic policing in a foreign country works, and having them be the only white person within 1,000 miles and experience other countries and culture. And it's always had a profound effect on the people that have participated. So I'm hoping that we can do that here as well.
How interesting. Is that a direct outgrowth of your work creating police departments and creating the functional aspects of law enforcement in these emerging?
It is. It's kind of a combination of experiences. So I certainly gained a lot personally and professionally from those experiences of, writing a new constitution in Haiti and developing a 5,000 person police force from scratch. Conversely, I've had the experience like the one I described in Laconia, where refugee and immigrant families moving into a very white state and a very white city were confronted with a variety of challenges. And this international exchange is kind of a combination of those experiences that has produced good results in other places.
And we'll be visiting that topic on another episode, but is that with the Rotarians, or is that...
Rotary, certainly a group locally that have expressed strong support for that concept and indicated a willingness to put some money behind it. They may be working with other community groups to facilitate the funding portion of this, but yeah, that Rotary very much has stepped up on that issue.
So interesting. This is an avocation on your part. This is an advocacy where you wouldn't have to do that, and you would think that towards the end of your career you could just come in and escape, but it doesn't sound like you're interested in sitting back in the chair.
No, and that's a problem too. And you asked about the ability to sort of blend and come in from the outside, and I can't say that it's easy. I guess the advantage I have is that I've done it successfully several times previously. Mm-hmm. But you take a place like Foxborough. When I was police chief in Southborough, I welcomed Ed into the association. When Ed became chief here, it was 4 or 5 years into my tenure as chief in Southborough. So I remember him well, and a wonderful man. 30 years in the same organization, no matter who you are, can breed a certain level of stagnation and so mm-hmm. on. And so it is a bit of a culture shock having a new person come in and whose expectations are different and whose priorities might be different. But my fundamental goal is to improve the organization, improve our processes, update our policies and practices to a point where they reflect modern police practices, mm-hmm. and to make it a fun, happy workplace where people want to come to work, and most importantly, to really do a good job of serving the needs of the citizens of Foxborough who deserve nothing less. So the cultural shift that occurs in the first year usually is always an interesting time and an interesting challenge. But I feel very fortunate to be working with an extraordinary group of young men and women who are anxious to learn and anxious to be led in a new direction, I think. And so we can build on the successes of the past and in some ways chart our own path to make sure that this agency is all it can be. And I only have one speed. I had one of the Foxborough officers said something funny to me. They always Google, people. That's the thing these days, I guess. So they Googled me and they found an article where I said, I wasn't sure if I had the energy to do this one more time. And one of the sergeants said, I'm glad we didn't get you when you were full of energy, because we're having a hard time keeping up now. So I only really know one pace, and it's kind of a hectic pace. But the officers are probably sick of hearing me say this, but my philosophy in both my personal relationships and my professional relationships is I always measure life by what I give and not by what I get. And so I'm rarely disappointed, because I'm not sitting around waiting for somebody to do something for me. I'm always trying to think of how I can give more and make the world a better place, or make my agency a better place. And so it's full speed ahead. And I'll give you everything I've got and hope I leave Foxborough better off than I found it when my day comes.
Well, you've touched on so many interesting events in your, we'll call them resume events, but so many different career stops along the way that I'd love to talk about each one of them. And of course, we're referring to former Chief of Police Ed O'Leary, and of course, we are speaking with current Chief of Police William D. Baker, Bill Baker, who is now 13 months on the job here. This is being filmed in November. Salty old veteran of Foxborough highways and byways. So you mentioned the rank and file and the folks that you now are working with. How have you found the response been? Have they been receptive?
Yeah,
and
they've
generally
been
positive
great.
Towards everything that you've brought to the table? I know there's never. I'm not asking for names, and there's never any perfect relationship. But overall, what do you think? How do you think things have gone?
I think it's been extraordinary. I've been very blessed throughout the course of my career, and Foxborough is no exception. It really is a great group of young men and women, and I talk to them obviously on a daily basis, and I try and work long enough hours, and I'm in a uniform and I'm out on the street with them, so I try and mingle with officers on all three shifts.
I have seen you, so yes, that is true.
And in doing so, I've also told them that police departments are sort of like orchestras. It's not my job here to come and make them all oboes. My job as a conductor of this orchestra is to try and get all these very different instruments playing beautiful music together. And so you can stay an oboe, and he can be a violin, and she can be a clarinet. My job is to get all those instruments, which are very different, to be playing beautiful music together, and I think we're making dramatic strides in that direction.
That's fantastic. So with all of the 13 months of experience you've had in Foxborough, what do you see as being, say, the top challenge or two? Or maybe challenge is a wrong statement. Maybe it's more, what are some of the things you think, hey, you know what, I've got an idea and I'd like to implement it?
Well, I think maybe one of the things that I think I have brought is a priority on the sort of enforcement, law and order side of things. I think most small towns in New England are happy to have their police not be very vigorous in giving local people speeding tickets, for example. It's kind of the classic example.
We hate it when other people speed on our streets, but
we
by
hate
golly,
it when other people,
we don't want.
So there is a
tell
bit
us not to speed
there
on
is
our
a
streets.
tinge of hypocrisy in there.
A tinge, yes.
But I think that because of our proximity to Providence and Boston, and because of the major highway systems, and with the prevalence of hotels and motels close to the highways, I was struck by the relative lack of drug enforcement. And I realized that the common theme these days is we can't arrest our way out of the drug crisis, and I agree with that. Mm-hmm. I've always looked at my organization's response to the drug crisis as kind of a three-pronged approach. So you have to have the prevention and education, you have to have treatment and rehabilitation, but I'm afraid that we're moving a little far away from the enforcement piece, which I still think is a necessary piece. So I think people locally have seen some dramatic involvement by the part of the Foxborough Police in some recent drug cases. Some of them were, pre-existing local problems that have now been addressed. Others were surprise cases with international connections, like the recent case down on Ford Boulevard, where 4.5 pounds of fentanyl were recovered by our officers. So that's an area where the drug issue and the enforcement issue in general is something that I have a little bit of a different slant on, perhaps. the activity at the stadium. I think we've analyzed the process of protective custody at the stadium, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the town of Foxborough was sued successfully over the use of protective custody in recent years. And I collaborated with the attorneys that represented us to see what lessons we could learn from them as a result of that litigation. And we've changed the way we deal with protective custody. So I would say at most major events, we're taking many fewer people into protective custody because we're now engaged in a strict application of the law, which says that you don't make the team if you're intoxicated. You have to be incapacitated, is what the law says. So we've reduced the number of people being taken into protective custody, but we probably increased the number of people being arrested for criminal
I was
violations.
going to say, because the one, oftentimes, at least prior to those lawsuits, happened several years ago by some fans, just to remind everybody, some fans that were attending a concert and they were taken into protective custody, they missed the concert. So and I don't mean to make light of it, but from an arrest standpoint, would they have preferred to have been arrested? It's always one of those questions. I think most of us have said, well, yeah, but
so
really, what was the issue here? And of course, it went through the courts and there was success on their side. So clearly there was an issue that needed to be addressed.
And I think we've now addressed that successfully, and the end result is that the strict application of the protective custody law means that you will have to be incapacitated before we take you into custody. On the other hand, if you've engaged in such a level of mischief that rises to the level of disorderly conduct, for example, you're more likely to get arrested for criminal behavior than you might have been in the past, because it was somehow easier in many jurisdictions just to take you into protective custody, let you sleep it off,
right,
and then you go home and no harm, no foul. But now, criminal conduct, I think you deserve to be held accountable for that criminal conduct if other people are affected, and we're doing that when it's required.
And I think, again, Chief Baker with the Foxborough Police Department, I always give such credit because there's so many decisions that go into each interaction. Is this a dangerous situation? Is it not? Is it one that I'm going to escalate by an interaction, or is it one that if I simply walk away, it's going to de-escalate?
And that's something that I think.
And that's where experience and training, but also when you're up at the stadium with 68,000 people, it seems like a no-win situation oftentimes. I think that's why a lot of us viewed that lawsuit as being more sour grapes than anything else. But clearly, if you've gone into the ruling and you've dug a little bit and created some outcomes that have changed your procedures, and maybe there has been something to be learned from it.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the police officers, the men and women of the Foxborough Police Department are obviously used to working in that large crowd environment, which not every department is. And I think they've shown very good judgment in their interaction in large crowds. Because whether it's policing Bike Week in Laconia or major disturbances in Kampala, Uganda, the theory is always sort of the same. You do have that decision to make, how much does my arresting this person contribute to more chaos and more disorder versus looking the other way at this particular moment in time. So it's always a delicate balance, but I think on balance, our folks do a very good job under difficult circumstances sometimes.
You know what my problem is right now? My program is only a half hour long, and I have 2 more hours worth of questions to ask you. I'm going to, of course, give you the last word, but just real quickly, you mentioned Haiti and you mentioned Uganda. What was your role in Haiti? I'm just fascinated
my role
by sitting across the table from somebody who just casually drops, I created a police force and helped write the Constitution.
Well, I certainly didn't do it by myself. But
I didn't say you did, but where does this come from?
Yeah, my first experience was a very interesting experience where the head of the FBI sent myself and 3 other people to Russia for the first time on behalf of the Bureau. And that kind of led to a bit of a reputation in that area, and my being invited by the Justice Department to lead this international section. And so I had the good fortune of going in and meeting, President Preval in Haiti and President Berger in Guatemala, and these magnificent opportunities to meet heads of state around the world. And I would meet with the presidents and the justice ministers, and I would conduct an assessment of the national justice system and national police forces, and then devise a strategy to improve it, and then bring it back to the State Department for funding, and the State Department would fund the programs, and we'd bring in collaborative partners from around the world as trainers and mentors, and try and improve access to justice in very complex places. So it's been really an extraordinary trip through this life, that's for sure, and I've been very fortunate.
Well, I'm going to give Chief Baker the last word here in a minute. I'm going to remind folks that we are speaking with our new, well, not so new, Chief of Police here in Foxborough, Massachusetts, Chief William D. Baker. You can, of course, get a hold of him up at the police department. I don't know if you want to get a hold of him too often, but when you do need him, he's very accessible. He's always returned my calls, been very accessible, including flagging him down on the street. He's always out there. So 508-543-4343, that's the business line up at the police department. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, I got that right. So Chief Baker, please tell us your vision and last words, and thank you so much for appearing on the program.
No, my pleasure. And I guess I'd like to close just by speaking to the people in Foxborough directly that watch the program and tell you how grateful my family and I are for the reception that we've received here in Foxborough. You've made the transition to becoming residents of Foxborough very easy. And to the men and women of the Foxborough Police Department, you too have been remarkable in terms of the gracious welcome to your new chief and the work that you've done with me to steer this ship in a slightly different direction. And my promise to all of you, residents and co-workers alike, is that you will get 180% out of me for the duration of my stay. And as I said earlier in the program, my goal is a simple one. It is to try and leave Foxborough better off than I found it. So grateful for this opportunity and grateful to be a resident and employee of the great town of Foxborough, the gem of Norfolk County.
There you go. And we thank you for taking the time to come out here and spend it with us and share the story. Again, Chief Baker, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And thank you, folks, for joining us here on this cable access channel. Foxborough Cable Access is made up of volunteers, and hopefully if you are of a mindset where you want to volunteer and become a part of this community, as Chief Baker has professionally, you can join us too on a volunteer basis here. Just stop by our studios at 28 Central Street or call us at 508-543-4858 and 4757. Lauren's going to get me on that one. And see how you can become part of our family here. On behalf of the family, Betty Travers, Deb Storrs, and Michael Stewart, Paul Beck behind the glass, Lauren Bitar, and to our good friend Jillian Larson, who has just left Foxborough Cable Access to begin her professional career. Congratulations and congratulations. And we look forward to seeing great things from you in your future. I'm Bob Hickey. Thank you. Have a great day, Foxborough.